Quest. Today we're canning peaches. Canning is a great way to preserve your peaches so that you maintain the quality of the peach without making it mushy. We do freeze some too, which is perfect if you want to make fruit smoothies, and we do make a little bit of jam out of peaches as well. But today we have some really good quality peaches that are pretty blemish free, and it's perfect to go ahead and put them in jars for canning. I'm going to start by showing you the equipment that we'll need. I'll walk you through everything that we have, and I'll talk to you about substitutions you can make. You can really make it work on minimal equipment. My list of equipment has expanded a lot over the years. And then I'll show you step by step how we get these ready to get them in jars, and let's get started. If you've watched my other videos on canning, you will notice that I've pointed this book out a lot. Mine's kind of old, it's been in this binder for a lot of years, but I use the USDA guidelines for canning. This is an excellent book to pick up. I will put the link for this in the description. It's in the description for most of my videos, but the peaches, the canning section for peaches, pears, and other fruit in here indicates the quantity for syrup. It indicates the number of jars that you'll get out of 1 bushel, for example. So this is a great reference guide for more than just canning peaches, but definitely pick up a copy of that book if you're looking for good reference. Will you be opening and closing the refrigerator a lot during the middle of this shot, or?
Okay, can she start that for real?
It is on, so she can start whenever she's
Yes,
done.
as soon as Ethan gets his fuzzy head out of here with his yogurt. Okay, about equipment. So a couple of things that you will need. Now, canning peaches is water bath canning, so you don't have to have a pressure canner. I have one, it fits 7 quarts of peaches, so it's the perfect size. You can also get away with having any large pot with a stand on the bottom of it. You have to have something that offsets the jars so the jars aren't touching the bottom. But my canner works, it fits, I have one, but if you don't worry. Any large size pot with a rack on the bottom will work. I also always have a pot going with my lids and rings. I put them together in here in the water, and I'm going to get that started with boiling to bring them up the temperature. You're doing 2 things here that's really important. Number 1, you're heating them up to sterilize them, and number 2, you're softening that rubber seal so that when we put those lids onto the jars, they get a really good, tight, firm seal down onto the jar. This pot is the hot water that I'm going to be using for the method that we call dip and slip, which you can drop your peach right in the hot water, about 30 seconds, maybe 60, depending upon how ripe they are, and that skin will slide right off. They'll come out of here and go into an ice bath, which we're going to fill up with some water here in a moment, and then they have to cool down there for a little bit. Then we'll be able to slip that skin right off and drop them into our sauce, or syrup. This pot is what I'm going to make my syrup in. It's going to be sugar water syrup. And we'll put our peaches right in there. We'll bring them up the temperature in there and pack them into our jars. That's called hot packing. I prefer hot packing when it comes to peaches because I think it makes a better quality peach. The alternative is a raw pack where you put raw peaches into your jars and pour the hot syrup on top. And I just find that they hold their texture and their flavor a little bit better with hot packing. So that's what we're going to do. When preparing your peaches for canning, I like to give them a good wash after they come back from the orchard. And I'm basically just washing off any dirt or debris and making sure that I get the fuzz off of them. Just give them a little rub under some cold water. And we're looking for peaches that are pretty blemish-free. So if I'm ordering from the orchard, I'm asking for firsts. These are blemish-free peaches. Seconds. Like this one is a first, but he's starting to look like a second because of the blemishes that are up here. I can cut that away before we put it in. So just give it a good wash, and we can deal with that later when it comes time. If they're too bruised because they've just ripened too much, we'll turn those into jam. So in my reference guide, there are 5 types of syrup that you can make. The one I use is very light, which is a 10% sugar, and I'm canning in a quart load, so I'll be using 10.5 cups of water to 1.25 cups of sugar. I know I have several batches to make, so I'm going to go ahead and double that to start with. And then in this section, it walks you through step by step. Peaches halved or sliced, it's the same process, whether you're doing a half peach or a sliced peach. And you can roughly estimate that about 17.5 pounds is needed per canner load. A canner load is 7 quarts. So we're going to use 17.5 pounds per load, and I think we're going to get 3 or 4 canner loads today based on the number of peaches that I bought. So we're using this as our reference guide, step by step how to do it. And we have the information here on how much sugar you need. So let's go ahead and get that measured. We use a lot of honey in this household for other things, but when it comes to making peaches, I do just go ahead and use white sugar. But you can substitute with honey, corn syrup, any alternative that you like. but we're going to use white sugar for this recipe. Because I'm doing 2 canner loads right now, I'm going to be putting in 2.5 cups of white sugar into my hot water, which I'm already starting to boil, and as soon as it comes to a boil, we'll go ahead and add this and melt it down. I want this ready so that as soon as my peaches come out of the dip and slip, the hot sugary water is ready for me to put them in. Okay, I've collected a lot of equipment over the years, so I definitely have more pots than I did when I first started canning, but you can definitely do this with less equipment. For example, we're going to use this pot to slip and dip our peaches, and that's just hot water. I'm going to put my peaches in, I'm going to slip those skins right off. You could slip and dip in here, wash the pot out, and then do your syrup with your peaches inside of here when you're finished. That's how I did it at the beginning. I was given this pot as a gift, and I'm loving using it because it's enough room to be able to do at least 2 canner loads in it. But if you don't have it, that's okay, you can substitute. Our water is pretty hot here. Once it's boiling, I'm going to go ahead and add my sugar, and then we'll get this melted and get started. Could you stop? Are we ready? This is the pot that I'm going to use for the dip and slip. It really helps if you have a spider to do this, but if you don't have a spider, you can do it with a ladle or a spoon as well. And I'm going to take a few peaches at a time on the spider and drop them down in here. About 30 to 60 seconds in here, and they'll split open. You wouldn't be able to pull this skin away like this on a fresh peach if you hadn't done this process. This gives you a nice smooth and clean peach to work with. It just slides right off. They are a little hot though. All right, they're ready. You're really just using the ice bath to help your hands out. You can see they're already coming off when they're coming out of the hot water. This just helps you be able to work with them. If you buy a freestone peach, they usually come right apart. So put your knife through and give them a little twist, and you can see they come right apart. That skin will slip right off for you, and this half is ready to go in the sugar water. In the second half, I'll just pull that skin right off and wiggle the stone right out of the middle, right in the sugar water, and that's it. And I just have to repeat this process a few hundred more times. So this is a really good example of what happens. This came out partial and it kind of fell apart on me because it was super ripe. I tend to put these pieces that kind of fall apart into a separate jar here, or a separate bowl, and I use them to make jam with. So if you lose one or you squish it or it just doesn't come apart as easily as you'd like it to, like that one came apart really easily. But that last one fell apart on me. Just make a pot of jam out of it. I have another video on jam. I'll have another one coming up soon. It's a really quick and easy process. We almost always make a batch of jam when we're finished canning peaches because we have these leftover pieces. They should make sure you buy a freestone peach. That means that the stone comes free of the peach pretty easily. And I'm just peeling off this skin. And if they come apart on you, put them in for a batch of jam. These are a red-shouldered peach, this variety, which will make your syrup a little pink, a little red. It's fine with me. I like them just the same. I'm separating the stone from my skins because my peach skins go out to the chickens and I don't like them to get the stones. So I'm separating them out. It looks like we're ready to put another batch in the hot water. If you wanted to make your peaches into sliced peaches to can, it's the same process. I just take the skin off first, and then I cut around the peach into the stone with my knife. They're very slippery, and I pop them out. They pop out really easily that way. And then once you have your slices all ready to go, it can pop into the pot just the same. If you peel them open and when you get the skin off, if you find that you have some that are bruised, these bruises are actually not that big of a concern to me. I'll put those in jam. I just don't like to can with them. So this is not really a half, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in the pot anyway. Nobody in my family's ever complained if they didn't get an exact half of a peach when it comes out of the jar. But I like to use all of the fruit, so it's okay to go ahead and keep that jam pot nearby. And if you don't want to make jam, you can take those pieces and just freeze them as whole chunks. They taste great in smoothies later. Okay, before we start canning our peaches, we need to have hot, sterile jars. I've washed all of them. You can wash them by hand or run them through your dishwasher, but they still need to be sterilized. You can do it one of two ways. You can put them on a tray in your oven, 225 to 250 degrees for about 15 minutes, and they'll be sterile. Or you can put them in your canner. I do often put them in my canner, but then you have to dip them out and dump all the hot water, so it is a little easier just to pop them in the oven. I'm going to do a little bit of both right now because we have so many peaches to can. I'm going to pop some of these in the oven too. So while I'm canning peaches, I'm putting them into this syrup, and I'm just pushing them down in the syrup. They'll be preserved and fine, won't bruise or get brown while they're in here. And I'll be finished with this soon, and we'll be canning them very shortly. Some of the peaches that I'm cutting that I'm using for jam, or the kids are sneaking out and having a bite of, they will brown. So if you have a little fruit fresh, a little protector to put on top of them, that would be good. It's not necessary, but it does help to keep them from browning. Browned peaches taste the same, they're absolutely fine, but nobody really likes the look of them. So I do throw a little bit of that on top to help slow down that process. All right, we're almost ready with a canner load to get started. I just have a few more peaches to do, and then we'll get that going. All right, our peaches are hot and ready. Just gonna set that aside. And I really just want to bring it up to temperature. I want it to boil, but I don't want it to be boiling rapidly. We're not trying to soften the peaches so much that they fall apart. Because I've chosen to make them in halves today instead of slices, what I'm going to do is carefully ladle each one out and lay them in the jars face down. So we're going to stack them on top of one another and nest them until we fill the jar up, and then add the syrup on top of it. If you're doing slices, you could just ladle them out and dump them right in. So it's your preference. It doesn't really matter how you do them. They all taste the same, but it's your preference how you want to put them in. My jars are out of the oven. They've been sterilized. I'm just going to lower these down in here. This takes a little time, but they really look pretty when you're done. It's easiest if you just pick them up with the cut side down on your spoon and slide them down along the side of the jar. And they go. I keep spinning the jar around and around so they can layer on top. Like most things that we can, you're leaving a ½ inch of head space, so think about that as you're laying your peaches in to make sure that you're leaving enough space that when you add liquid, you still have that ½ inch of head space at the top. So this one, I think I can do one more. My peaches are varying sizes, so just grab a small one if you need a little more, large one if you need a lot more. I actually think I can do one more beyond that. All right, and I'm just going to give a little push with my spoon to push them down in there, and I'll fill up to the ½ inch mark. And this is a good spot to use a funnel. My syrup is a little red because of the red-shouldered peaches that I chose to use. All right, now, important step. You have to run a knife down alongside the peaches to let the bubbles come up. And as I do that, you'll see that things drop a little, and sometimes you want to add a little bit more syrup to the top of it. And that's the process. We just have to keep doing this over and over again until they're all full. Okay, our jars are full. I'm going to do the second batch in just a moment, but I want to get these jars in the canner. So if you've watched me can before, you know I always have my lids and rings in hot water, and I take a paper towel and I wipe the tops of the jars off. Any sugar or bits of peach in here will prevent you from getting a good seal. And you can see a little bit of residue on the napkin. So that's definitely sugar that we need to get off of there. And when they're all clean, I'm going to use my magnet lifter to go ahead and pull my lids and jars, my lids and rings out of the hot water. I put them in as a set ahead of time so that I can just lay them on top. It's ideal that you don't touch the inside of that lid. I put them all on, and then once they're on, I'm going to come back and tighten them all. Now remember, we talked about this earlier. This is called hot packing. It's a hot jar with hot fruit going in it. I'm keeping the lid on my peaches for now until I have the chance to come back and do the second set. Keeping it nice and warm. I'm going to put my lid on my rings and lids as well. Now you want to tighten these hand tight, but don't tighten them so much that any pressure that might build up is going to cause your jars to crack. Sometimes you will see some bubbling come out from underneath of these lids. That's a good thing. That's okay. But don't over tighten them. Hand tight, hand tight. All right, now they just need to go into the canner. I'm using a canner, but I said we're just water bath canning today, so we're not going to be pressure canning. We're not concerned with it building pressure. We just want it to be in boiling water. So this is boiling. I've turned it down just so that it's manageable when I go to open it up. Be very careful opening up your canner, tilt away. All right, and then we're just going to carefully go ahead and put our jars in here, one at a time. Make sure that when you put them in, you have to have at least 1 inch of water over top of the jars in order for them to safely seal. All right, last jar is in, and I am going to put my lid on top, but I am not going to tighten this up and seal my canner. I'm just resting it on top, bringing back up the temperature, and you'll start to hear it boil. You'll hear the jars rocking in there a little bit. Don't let them rock so hard that they bang into each other and break, but we want to let them boil. So it's just finding that perfect spot. For me, it's generally like a medium high, but you just have to listen. When we get it back up to the boil, then that's when we turn on our timer, and we're water bath canning for 25 minutes. All right, the first batch is finished, so I'm going to go ahead and take this lid off. Be careful with that steam. And while these were processing in the canner, I went ahead and filled my second batch. So I'll put them right in here as soon as I get these out. Hear the steam? They'll steam and sizzle a little bit. And you can see the fruit floats to the top and the liquid on the bottom. And the next few minutes are when you'll start hearing these pops. As they cool down, you'll start hearing them snap down into place. I like to use wide mouth jars when I can peaches because it makes it a little easier to get the peaches down inside and a little easier to get them out when you go to eat them. So if you have wide mouth, use them. But if you don't, you can do slices and fit them into a regular mouth jar. It's totally fine. This set is going to go right in. And we're going to crank it back up to boiling and run this one for 25 minutes as well. And then I'll get started on some more. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope that you'll give canning peaches a try, even if you just do one set. Get a small batch of peaches and do one canner load. But if you have the equipment out, you may as well do 2 or 3 and have enough to last through the winter. These are starting to cool down. I'm going to let them sit here until that they pop. It usually takes overnight until the next morning until they're completely secure. You can see the ridges are still sitting up on the tops of the jars, so they haven't settled down quite yet. They're very, very hot. But tomorrow morning, I'll come along and take all of these bands off. I always store without the bands. I'll take the band off, take a wash rag and wash around the outside. You'd be surprised how much sugar ends up on the outside of the jar. And that will create mold over time, so you want to clean them up. So I'll clean them up, I'll mark the top of them and put them downstairs. Now the USDA guidelines will probably tell you that they can only last about a year. I know that we've had some last a little longer than that, and we still enjoyed them and they're delicious. These are great right out of the jar. They go in kids' lunch boxes and they're delicious. They're really great for desserts, or just throw some ice cream with them and have them. So a lot of my videos lately have been canning in the kitchen, and that's really what July and August look like around here. We'll be heading outside to do some more gardening videos soon, and some other craft videos coming up that I hope that you'll join me for. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, comment if you have any questions, and subscribe to the channel so you can come back and see more content with us soon.